Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Quentin Q. Crisco, Sonny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce. Bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
And we are back with another episode of Bears on Tap. My name is Quentin Crisco. I am joined by Mr. Sonny Verma. Sonny, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing good. You're starting to catch glimpses of people fighting in, practice, and all of a sudden that kind of triggers the whole football season starting.
Yeah, these guys are ready to hit someone in a different uniform. That much is clear after their very physical practice, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But to give a quick rundown of what we're talking about, we're going to talk about some recent Bears news, maybe some rumors before we get into breaking down the Minnesota Vikings matchup with the Bears. And for the next few weeks, the second half of our episodes, first half is going to be kind of that news stuff that's coming out, newer things to you guys. In the second half, we're going to go division opponent by division opponent to kind of break down how the Bears match up with these teams. But starting off, I mean, one thing that is hot in the NFL market right now is Micah Parsons, the man who has, I think it's 14 sacks or more every single year of his NFL career, according to PFF stats at least, because PFF doesn't do half sacks. It's like if you had a half sack, you had a full sack type thing. And I like that method better. So I like to say he has 14 plus sacks every year in the NFL. Micah Parsons is an absolute problem to block. Sonny, should the Bears be making some calls to Jerry Jones here?
I mean, I think calls are going to happen regardless. And this is a question that, all Bears fans, content creators, channels out there have been discussing over the past week. And I think it comes down to how good do you think this Chicago Bears team is? If you think this is a Bears team that can win 10, 11, 12 games, I think you have to make that phone call. And we can talk about what their price is going to be and if it's worth it. But if this is a team that you think can, maybe win the division or at least come close, and you're talking about a playoff caliber team, Micah Parsons can turn your defense into a top 5 defense. And if the offense, with Caleb, if he can make that jump from year 2 and have that chemistry with Roma Dunze, who I've been hearing great things about, Colson Loveland, you're going to have a very solid offense matched up with a top 5 defense, a player who's in his prime, I guess you can say. If not, I don't think he's even close to the end of his prime yet. I'm leaning towards yes. Again, the phone calls have to happen regardless. I've heard like 2 first-round picks, maybe in a couple late-round picks. If that's the cost, you have to wonder. But I'm also a Bears homer. I'm a little more optimistic on this team. I think they can absolutely win double-digit games. And then when you add Micah Parsons, one of the best linemen in the league, to a team that's going to make the playoffs, I think all of a sudden you become, hey, can we make the playoffs? To, hey, can we win the division?
Yeah, I mean, the parallels have to be made, right? It's the same conversation as the Khalil Mack trade.
100.
Second-year QB,
Yep.
New head coach. You're looking for a real star on a defense that is in good shape from a talent standpoint, but is really missing that premier player. And Mack was 27 when they made the trade for him in 2018. Parsons is 26 right now. Both looking for a massive contract, probably the highest paid defender in the NFL type stuff. The parallels are there. And honestly, I do think one thing that makes it a little more difficult to sell for me, and don't take this the wrong way, if you have a chance to get a player of Micah Parsons' talent, you typically do it, but he doesn't quite fit Dennis Allen's idea of a defensive end very cleanly. I don't think Dennis Allen would scoff the thought of having Micah Parsons on his defense one bit.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a slight consideration there of, if you're giving that much capital, how do you want them to fit within the roster that you have currently assembled? And I'm not sure he is a player that fits in every scheme as cleanly as a guy like Khalil Mack did, where it was like Mack fits in whatever defense you run, no matter what, because his run defense is just as good as his pass rush. I'm not sure you have that same impact with Micah Parsons because his run defense can be suspect at times. But he is that bucket getter for you.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. That's why I think this has been more of a conversation for the fans as opposed to, you hearing any sort of whispers coming out of Chicago Bears land. This is one of those where I think ultimately Micah is going to be worth more to a different team than he is worth to the Chicago Bears. Again, I would do the 2 first-round picks and maybe a couple late-round picks, but I think another team will get more value out of the fit that Micah would bring to them and be more willing to give up more assets because it's going to fit more like a glove with them. So I'm glad you brought that up, especially with the Dennis Allen situation. It's his first year here. The money that we have, we need to make sure we spend it right. As you said, there's no way anybody's going to not want Micah Parsons on their football team. But I just think that there's going to be teams out there that are going to want him more.
Yeah, and there is one exception in Dennis Allen's history where he was the defense coordinator for the Denver Broncos when they drafted Von Miller. You might want to fact check that, but I believe that's the case. And Von Miller is a very anti-Dennis Allen defensive end historically, but he's also Von Miller. And I think Micah Parsons does fit a similar ilk there. But I'm just not sure how the Bears are going to value that. And ultimately, if I'm sitting here, I don't think the Cowboys are moving him. I think the Cowboys they love the drama. They love the marketing they get out of this. And they are also just kind of dumb with the way they do this stuff. So I would bet that the Cowboys are going to give him a record-breaking deal before the season ends. But and he might be well on his way to a defensive player of the year by that point. But I think he's going to be playing for the Cowboys this season.
Yeah, I mean, nothing would surprise me with Jerry Jones. But as you mentioned, I don't think for him, it's almost a positive. It's a bragging moment if the bottom line on ESPN, flashes the Dallas Cowboys are going to have the highest paid defensive player ever. He likes those splashy headlines. And, now what's happening right now, people are talking about the Cowboys. And right now, Micah can tweet out whatever he wants to tweet out, but he is a Dallas Cowboy. And it's good for Jerry because they're talking about the Dallas Cowboys. I'm sure Jerry's fielding calls, and it's his way to kind of maybe gauge the value of what Micah might be worth on the open market. But ultimately, I don't think anything is going to happen. I think he's going to be a Dallas Cowboy, at least for the next few years, just a lot richer.
Now, in this same sentiment, though, we've seen Ryan Poles make moves this time of year, right? We saw him go get Dan Feeney 2 years ago this time of year. Last year, we saw him attempt to get Matt Judon. Do you think Poles is gonna be itching to make a move here before the season starts?
I think it depends on what they're seeing, right? They're watching practices right now. I think maybe what they see in these inter squad scrimmages with Miami. If obviously we all know that position is the weakness on the football team coming into it was a weakness coming into the offseason. It's arguable how much they really shored that up, but is it showing to be a glaring weakness during practices? If it is, then he's probably more inclined to, again, find out what the price is. But I mean, this is drastic. This is not Judah. This is Micah Parsons, and this is going to cost a significant portion of the assets that you've been, kind of accumulating over the last couple of years. So, I still don't think they're ultimately going to do it. But I guess Ryan is the type of guy who I don't know. Is he the type of guy to make this big of a splash this close to the season?
I think he could. I don't put a lot. I think that he is in a position where he has felt some pressure, and getting the extension, I think, takes off some of that pressure that he did get. But also, I do think that there is an itch of, we need to just win football games. I think your process starts to go out the window at some point when you're entering year 4 and you still haven't won football games.
And not just that, you still have Caleb on that rookie contract. So if you're looking to make a splash and spend a lot of money on a guy, you've got 2 years to do it.
We forget Ryan Pace was very similar to Ryan Poles his first 3 years. It was that fourth year when he started, when he was like that itch, he had to scratch it now. It's like, I need to win football games.
Yeah.
It was Ryan Pace and Ryan Poles' careers have actually been very similar so far.
That's
So
very comforting for
no, it's not, because
right now.
So here's where Ryan Pace got it. Like, Ryan Pace got the quarterback wrong, right? And then you start trying to cover your tracks for that by making bigger signings, bigger trades, and I don't think he realized this till 2019. So after his fourth season as GM, going into his fifth was when the bad moves really started to stack. But that was all to cover the tracks of, I picked the wrong quarterback. I need to like make up for it somehow. And so, I mean, hopefully that's not where we're going with Caleb. I don't think it is. But to this point, I do see a very similar capital allocation between the two GMs and the way they've done stuff.
And I will say, though, if this were to happen, then kind of what I opened with, how I talked about how close do you think the Chicago Bears are to, truly contending for a Super Bowl? If Ryan Poles makes this sort of deal, that tells me that he thinks that, we might just be one star on that defensive line away. And that all of a sudden, not that I'm already not energized for the season, that gets me pumped more, knowing he thinks we might be that close.
Yeah, and honestly, I have to say, I just because you mentioned that, like, we get this idea, or some people get this idea in their head. I've been guilty of this before, that the NFL requires long rebuilds.
Yeah,
and it doesn't.
No.
You look around the league, teams go worst to first every single year. There's no reason for a rebuild to take 3-4 years, even if the roster wasn't good to begin with. Like, teams change their fortune with good coaching and good player acquisition every single year through the draft, through the coaching decisions that they make. Last year, we saw Washington do it, end up in the NFC Championship, right? I thought Washington was going to be a number one pick team last year. Yeah. These teams turn around their stuff quickly all the time. There's no reason any given year you can't be a team who has a chance at the playoffs at the very least. But that's just my 2 cents. That hit a bit of a nerve point for me. That just something about that conversation. But where I was going with my trade question was, and this I got to give a shout out to my buddy Danny Meehan, who messages me about this. The Broncos made their depth chart came out the other day, and it created all this controversy because RJ Harvey, their rookie running back, was listed as 6th string on their depth chart, but he's getting way too many reps in practice to be 6th string. He's clearly going to be a big part of that offense. But the thing that gets overlooked with that is they had Audric Estime, their 2nd-year running back, I believe 4th or 5th round pick, listed as 3rd string, which, if you believe Harvey's going to be further ahead, is really 4th string. Audric Estime was a guy I liked a lot in the draft, a guy who can be compared to David Montgomery in a lot of ways, and a guy who I'm looking at their roster saying, there might be a chance that there's just not room for him here if they're not carrying 4 or 5 running backs. So that's kind of where my eyes are set. And like I said, big shout out to Danny Meehan for mentioning that, because I agree with him. I think that is a clear option for the Bears to be attacking.
Yeah, it's how much it's depending on Ben Johnson, right? Like, obviously they were looking for an upgrade at that position. I was looking at the Bears depth chart earlier. It's funny, the way they're talking about Monangai, but I think he was listed like 5th when it comes to the running back chart. That's why, for what I like to joke around, a casual like me, it's hard to know what to believe, because the way they were making him sound like, he could be the 2nd or 3rd guy, but then this list comes out, and he's further down the depth chart. So that's why it's hard for me to really know where a guy's listed, who really is cut worthy, until really the preseason games start, and then we actually get to see who's playing, like who's fighting for a spot, as opposed to who's not playing so much, like thinking, okay, the coaching staff just doesn't want this guy hurt.
Yeah. And I mean, mentioning the Bears depth chart, I'll pull that up and let's see if there's anything interesting on there. because I mean I took a glance at it yesterday, and it was interesting. They had the 12 personnel listed as the starting, so 2 tight ends as starting. Roshan Johnson was second string running back with Travis Homer behind him, and then Ian Wheeler, Monungai, and Deion Hankins is listed as the other, like so all in the 4th string category. So that's a bit of a surprise that Homer's in the 3rd string with how little we've heard about him during camp. I would expect. I really think the rookies are like there's a sentiment here of you got to earn it, even though they might have a bigger role than is being let on in the depth chart outside of Loveland, who's listed as a starter. Because like Burden is way down there too.
Yeah. There was also a name that jumped out at me. I'm trying to recall who it was. Was it Sewell that they had listed as a starter as well?
Yeah. Or they had Sewell ahead, 2nd string, but like they only had 2 linebackers on the depth chart.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to pull that up. Sorry, this is awful radio. But, that was another a name that jumped out at me. They had Kyler Gordon listed as defensive back. Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be playing. You look at Dennis Allen's defense. He wants his nickel corners and his safeties to be pretty interchangeable.
They're telling you,
yeah. I think that's what we're going to be seeing.
Yeah, they're flat out telling you that, Kyler doesn't have a position. He's got all positions. No. And, I'm really looking forward to seeing how Dennis uses Kyler this year.
Well, and I'm also interested in what that means for Kevin Byard or Jaquan Brisker, because I'm not sure I really like either of those guys playing much nickel, but how you get creative with that. I'm interested to see how that all comes together. But yeah, outside of that, the only other surprise I think was, if you want to call a surprise or notable item, was Braxton Jones starting left tackle with Ozzie behind him. That one was up for debate, and I think it still is up for debate. But
100%.
For now, Braxton is the starter according to that depth chart.
I think Austin Booker's been getting a little love since that depth chart. Again, it's such a preliminary depth chart. It's hard to know how serious to take it, but to see if he can make this sort of jump to be a rotation guy, that'd be important.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because on the D line they had 5 defensive linemen listed as starters, just designated as D line, not defensive end or D tackle,
right?
Which I think tells you a little bit about how interchangeable and how positionless they see their defensive line in Dennis Allen's system, and have 5 of them listed as starters. It's also very interesting because, my guess would be there are going to be some games, depending on the offense they're playing, where Andrew Billings is a starter who's getting a lot of snaps, and some games where Andrew Billings doesn't play at all. It's just going to depend on the personnel that they're facing and how that matches up.
Do you like that?
I like that a lot. I love that. I love Dennis Allen's defense. I don't love his defensive line structure. Mm-hmm. I think that he games up so much, it gets to be a little too much for me sometimes. But at the same time, I like so much of what he does on the back end and schematically that I forgive my dislike of the defensive line at times for the variety he brings on a down to down basis that I think is just so strong that ultimately Dennis Allen is a defensive back, right? Mm-hmm. He played safety at Texas A&M. Right. Safety is his position. He is a safety guy. He wants his corners and his safeties to be somewhat interchangeable because it makes it much harder on the quarterback. And he believes in his ability to game up the defensive line. I don't love gaming up defensive line because I think it's a position that does just take a lot of talent over scheme. But I'll give that up for a guy who's as proven as Dennis Allen and gives as much variety to the game as he does.
And that's what kind of prompted my question, because you saying that, there's a part of me that it's just just put your best players on the field as often as possible. There's that line of thinking. But, if Dennis has got a history of this, and again, it's playing the analytics, right? They're seeing this. And so what matters the most? It's putting players in the position to succeed. And if, player A is not fit for situation B, well, then put the guy, who may be less talented, but who's got the stronger traits to succeed in situation B. And so all of a sudden it works. But again, for me, it would just be frustrating not seeing Andrew Billings out there. Because, for me, it's I want to see him. I've seen him make impacts on that defensive line. But, that's where I'm kind of coming from.
And shout out to Lou in the comments. Don't worry, we'll talk Lions next week. We're doing week by week, brother. Week by week. But one last thing before we get to our next item here is Montez Sweat. He seems really, really excited about this defense. And there was a quote from him, might have been a week ago or a little over a week ago, about how he spent portions of this offseason watching a lot of Cam Jordan tape from the Saints, the Cam Jordan defensive end from the Saints, which makes me think that Dennis Allen might be putting Montez Sweat in a similar role to what he was doing with Cam Jordan, which is really interesting for Sweat because when I look at that starting defensive line, it's like Odeingbo, Dexter, Billings, and Jarrett. They're all like near 300-pounders. And Sweat, he's a big defensive end, but he is more of a defensive end build than like a guy like Odeingbo. To me, I see that and I say, okay, well, he fits more the Cam Jordan kind of role, I think, where Jordan was like 270, 280, but he not the 290 plus range. I'm really excited to see what Montez Sweat does in this defense because I think it could be one of the best things to happen to him in his career to be playing for Dennis Allen.
Yeah, I would say he's the guy who seemingly is the most energized with all the changes that have happened. I know a couple people who've been able to watch these practices and attend, and like what they've told me has got me really excited. Like two of the best players performance-wise, they've said, are Montez Sweat and Javon Dexter. And if those two really do take a leap, I mean, Sweat doesn't need to take a leap. Sweat just needs to be the player he's been throughout his career. But if Dexter's able to take the leap, alongside on the same line as someone like Sweat, then all of a sudden we have something really excited to be about when it comes to this defense.
Well, and I'll even challenge that a little bit. For Sweat to be the guy he was his first year in Chicago, because the rest of it, that was above the rest of his career. Every other year, he had never reached that height until that season. So for him to be that guy he was in 2023, that would be huge for the Bears. But with all that being said, let's talk a little bit about the noise coming out of Hallis Hall, the clickbait, some might call it, the Caleb clickbait, as we so eloquently said pre-show. What do you make of all the negativity that seems to be coming out when the Bears offense seems to actually be clicking pretty well the last week or two?
Again, we kind of talked about this in the pre-show. I don't know if it was Barstool or who it was, but they pointed out that whether it's Colin Cowherd or any of these guys, like talking about Caleb Williams for whatever reason is almost a guaranteed way for people to click on your video. I don't know if it's the nail polish. I don't know if it's the crying, to his mom after the game with USC in college. Him being the first overall pick, obviously coming with high expectations to a Chicago Bears team, which has a diehard fandom who are very, let's be honest, like we can easily be trolled. And so, there's anger there. So I don't get it either. It's kind of people are looking for an excuse to count Caleb out, and it triggers the Bears audience. And so I think it's just kind of, we keep falling into a trap because, as you said, there's nothing that really I'm concerned about from what I've been hearing from either Ben Johnson or the camp. I think things are going maybe not 100% smoothly. Like things can always be better, but not to the point where all of a sudden, like Caleb has more to prove this year than Trevor Lawrence. One of the people had tweeted out when Caleb.
Yeah, Orlovsky did that on ESPN. Caleb has the most to prove of any quarterback in the NFL this season, which is utterly ludicrous.
Based on
because
what?
He's going into his second season. He's going to get a third season. Whereas a guy like some guys like Anthony Richardson, who's playing preseason football all night, this is probably his last chance to be a true starter and get a starting opportunity. If he doesn't take that by the reins, he might never get another chance. Like that has to be above Caleb, right?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, there's no instance where that makes sense. And so that's why for me, it's just right now, Bears fans, off-season champions, 3-4 years in a row. So it's a way for everyone else to kind of cash in on that. That video of Caleb throwing at the net went viral. And, Caleb kind of addressed it in the press conference earlier today. He's like, I don't understand why anyone else, their throws didn't get posted online. But, he was having fun with it. And, having a quarterback that shows emotion is not a bad thing, but it's just, I think we're just easy bait right now. And unfortunately,
we have been
Caleb is the target.
We've been easy bait for 50 years. We're the most vulnerable fan base when it comes to their quarterback, because we have been suffering for 50 years, and we just need a damn break. We just need a break. Please, Caleb, give us that break this year.
Yeah, I mean, so let me. Any concern at all with anything you've been hearing about Caleb?
No, I'm not worried about it at all. And I'm the last guy to get worried about preseason stuff, about training camp stuff. I kind of shut a lot of it out this time of year and try to focus on things that are within my not within my control, because I don't control any of this, but like within reason or within an analytical purpose. And I just don't think much of this serves any type of analytical purpose or real value to the season from a fan standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. Right now, very minimal concern. And it's just, it's hard, but just block out the noise. As you said, that's all it is. It's noise. It's people getting excited. Football's right around the corner. Preseason starts tonight. How do we, get the NFL crowd watching us? Hey, let's go antagonize one of the most passionate fan bases in the country right now with one of the most lightning rod quarterbacks in the entire league.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about the mental aspect of why this is like lightning rod time, why it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking this all matters so much. And to me, it's like I've put a lot of thought into this over the years of like, it is really hard for me to analyze stuff this time of year, break anything down, because we're just waiting for week one, right? There's no new information. There's no new content to make. The only thing that's new are these practices. So obviously we have to make content for that, right? But like, there's only so much you can read into any of it. You end up between like a rock and a hard place of just like banging your head against a wall. Like, this is important, but it's not, but it has to be, because there's nothing else to talk about. It's like,
yeah. And with the Chicago Bears, you have Ben Johnson. There's not much to negatively say about Ben yet. He's the brand new shiny toy. Caleb, there's certain sections of the media out there who think he was a disappointment last year. And, the Bears quarterback position, as you just kind of alluded to, is it's a conversation that sparks passion amongst the fan base. And the fact that he wasn't the far and away rookie of the year, despite being the number one overall pick, after what we've gone through with Justin, what we've gone through with Mitch Trubisky, people know that even mentioning the B word connected to Caleb Williams will get Bears fans, irate and defensive. And with that comes passion. With that comes the clicks.
Yeah. And so we end up here. I am a little more interested with these upcoming joint practices, seeing how the offense does against a defense that isn't seeing them every day and is going to throw some different things at them that they might not see from their home team defense. And I am interested to see these joint practices coming up here and that lead into this preseason game with Miami on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. So a random question, Q. Does the NFL decide who has these joint practices, or do the coaches get together and they decide?
This is coach decision.
Okay.
Coach, GM, front office. Like the last year or 2 years ago, the Bears did it with Indy because Ryan Poles is close with Chris Ballard, and it's easy. It's just an easy bus ride. Yeah. It's not. Usually, it's either an opponent that you are about to play in the preseason, or someone close by to you who's not a division opponent.
Okay, yeah, I was just
like, I think Philly and the Jets did one because it's like an hour away from each other.
Makes sense. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was NFL inspired or what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but let's get into our second half segment of the show, and that is to talk about how the Bears match up with the first division opponent we're breaking down. Their week one opponent, the Minnesota Football Vikings. I love saying it like the football Viking. Like there's a different Viking. But the Minnesota Vikings last year, Bears lost 2 games to them. Last 5 years, Bears are 2-8 against the Vikings. It's been a tough stretch against a team who the Bears have historically kind of had the number of, at least at Soldier Field. Vikings have had a really tough time historically at Soldier Field, but the last 5 years, we haven't really seen that.
You know, I was thinking, and I should have thought of this before we started recording, is how's Ben Johnson done against the Minnesota Vikings over the past couple of years? Like, I wonder what his offensive output has looked like against.
I think it's pretty good.
You know, because, I mean, that obviously serves its purpose here, too. Since he's coached within the division, he's familiar with Minnesota. You know, it's not a guy that
Last season, they won 31-29 in week 7 and then 31-9 in week 18 with playoff implications on the line. And then 2 years ago, let's see, they won 30-24 in week 16 and 30-20 in week 18. So the last 4 times he's played him, he's hung 30 every time.
And he's 4-0.
Yeah. And that's the Brian Flores. I think those 2 years of the Brian Flores defenses. I think once you get beyond that, you're outside of the Brian Flores defenses.
Right. So that's why, you know, what Lou said earlier in the comment section, you know, it may not necessarily apply. You know, having Ben be the guy in charge here, he's very familiar with that Minnesota Vikings defense. He's not a college coach that's come up or a coach coming in from a different conference. He knows what the Vikings are all about. Now, of course, nobody's saying the Bears offense is anywhere near what the Detroit Lions offense is. That's kind of what we're waiting to see here. But I'm going to test, right? Literally the first game is going to be going up against the team that won, what was it, 13 games last year? Was it 14?
14, I think.
14 games last season. Obviously, they're going to be missing a player, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But it'll be a good barometer, I think, just to see, you know, hey, is this, if again, Bears fans might not like me saying this, but even if we keep it close, I think it's a reason to be optimistic that we might be closer to winning this division than some people are giving them credit for.
Well, and I mean, the first time they played the Vikings last year, they took them to overtime. Like they had a bit of a miracle with an onside kick that they scored 10 points in the final 2 minutes to force overtime. Bears scored 27 points in that game. They ended up losing in overtime, but I mean, Caleb did pretty well against Flores in both games, even especially once you consider how rough. Like, I believe the second time they played them was the game where Karan Amagaji was starting at left tackle, and it was rough. Yeah. Like, it was really rough. And the Bears offense was just kind of non-existent that day. They lost 30-12, but Caleb had a decent day overall in the 2 games against Minnesota. Let's see, he is 50-78, 64 completion percentage, 530 yards, so 265 yards a game, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 5 sacks, which you'd like to see go down some. But even, I mean, for him, 2.5 sacks a game wasn't bad. Like, that was far from his worst performances from a sack perspective. But he actually looked fairly comfortable against the Brian Flores defense, especially for a rookie.
Like, this could be one of those games where, you know, I'm curious to see what the spread is going to look like, but Bears win this game, which, you know, you just mentioned the stats. You know, we talked about Ben Johnson and his history against the Vikings defense, and you talked about Caleb Williams and his 2 games that he played against the Vikings last year. There's hints there that the Bears could win this game. And if they do, all of a sudden, you know, we enter the national conversation, I feel like, almost immediately. It's going to be talked about. It's going to be considered an upset. Maybe it's not going to be as big of an upset as people are making it out to seem, but I mean, they have a chance very early in the season to kind of establish themselves as, hey, let's play some football. We're actually a really good football team.
So last year at Soldier Field, that's the game that the Bears took to overtime, middle of the season. Vikings were, I believe, 3-point favorites. Right now, Minnesota are 2-point favorites for week 1. I think that's going to end up near a pick'em by game day. at least unless these reports about JJ McCarthy start to turn, I think that's going to end up at a pick 'em.
See, I'm going to go the opposite direction. I think it'll be closer to a field goal. So wait, what makes you think it's going to be a pick 'em? You think the Bears are going to look that good, or you just think everything that we're going to hear about McCarthy struggling and Addison being out, that the field is going to kind of even out?
I think Addison being out, plus McCarthy struggling through camp so far, at least, and the noise will increase about Ben Johnson against Minnesota having been good in the Brian Flores era, about the Bears offense having some stuff up. The Bears coaching staff has the advantage in this game.
Yeah.
Like, they very clearly do, because the Minnesota does not know what they might pull out, like what they're going to look like, what type of offense they're going to run. They're guessing, which gives the offense even more advantage. Even if they guess right, like it's almost like I know that you know that I know, like like the Bears coaching staff does have an advantage in this game, and I think the sharp bettors are going to jump on that.
Just remember, news outlets, if you talk about Ben Johnson's records and Caleb Williams' success, credit Bears on tap. You heard it here first, a month before the season started. Yeah, I mean, I guess that'll be interesting. For me, it's just like, just like we're hearing about JJ McCarthy, you hear the national media kind of clowning on Caleb a little bit too. But you're right. Like, the sharps don't listen to that. It's more of the meathead Vikings fans, or the casual fans of these teams that eat that stuff up. The guys who are actually paying attention, they're not going to be scared away by little viral clips that go crazy on social media. So let's take a note to pay attention to this, and when we do our actual week 1 preview, when it is week 1, let's kind of follow up on this and see where the line moved.
Yeah, and I mean, when we look at this actual lineup, like, the Bears have an advantage in the receiver room. I think that the Vikings are pretty weak at the cornerback spot, very weak at the cornerback spot, frankly. I said the same thing last year. They were able to make it work, but I think they're a little weaker this year than they were last year at corner, where they lost, I believe it was Stephon Gilmore. They had Stephon Gilmore out there, who actually I was not expecting to play as well as he did for them last year. And now, they picked up Isaiah Rodgers, and they got Blackman back in there after I believe he was injured for a large portion of last year. But I only see one cornerback who I really feel good about, and Byron Murphy out there. The other two they're kind of wild cards to me. And that's where I think Ben Johnson, you're going to see him attacking space with DJ Moore, with Luther Burden the third. I'm not sure how you're going to attack with Rome Odunze. I'm sure you will. But I think this first game is a spot where you're going to see some creative ways to get DJ Moore and Luther Burden the football in space and let them get some yards after the catch.
I like what you're saying, but what about Loveland? I feel like his skills it's going to be hard for the defense to figure out what to do with him. I know you have Cole Kmet starting. Is that because of the depth chart that came out?
No, frankly, that was just left over from a previous graphic. But yeah, no, I mean, so you'll have Loveland in there too, and Loveland, like, it's just going to say NA above his name anyways. So
yeah.
Concerned about it. I can see Loveland being he's a major piece of what I was saying about the coaching advantage.
Yeah.
No one knows how Colson Loveland's going to be deployed. You can't have a clean plan of how to defend him because you don't know what he is.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And so you're right with a Moore and Burden, but I think Loveland's a guy to keep an eye out because there's no tape on him. We know the Bears are high on him. They took him before they took guys like Tyler Warren and stuff. They see something in Loveland, and he's the guy who's been mentioned arguably more than anybody else when it comes to, how well they're playing when it comes to these practices. But yeah, I mean, I'm taking a look at these defensive backs that Minnesota is bringing. And you're right. I think we have a clear advantage when it comes to the offense. It's can Caleb make those throws? And if he can make those throws, I don't know if the Minnesota Vikings have the guys to make the plays to, turn it in their favor.
Yeah, if he can execute Ben Johnson's chess moves, basically is the way I
Right.
see it. Because you're
Exactly.
talking with
Perfectly.
this matchup, you're talking Ben Johnson versus Brian Flores on the chess moves more than anything. Like, because I don't think Caleb is going to be in such a command of the offense in his first year in this offense, week one, where he's making a bunch of checks and changes. Like, he's not, I don't think he's playing chess with Brian Flores yet. It's Ben Johnson playing the chess match. And that's where Brian Flores can get tricky with you, because he'll start changing stuff up after the mic clicks off. So there will be some factor of that. And to your Loveland point, I wouldn't be shocked if there is a welcome to the NFL moment for Loveland with Harrison Smith, like where Brian Flores just says, Harrison Smith is our Colston Loveland stopper, and he's gonna force an error. Like, that wouldn't shock me either. But I am worried about how you're going to be able to run the football against this defense. I mean, I think Harrison Phillips, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen is a hell of an interior to be running against. Even if I think Hargrave and Allen are over the hill, they're still going to be in the best shape of their life week one. We're probably not going to see the over the hill effects until like week 5, week 6. So I do think it's going to be tough to run the football against this D line, especially with the running back room that the Bears are putting out there, which is why I point more to the DJ Moore Luther Burden, because I think they're going to have to be more of an extension of the run game.
Yeah, I think, once the season starts, like, the biggest question marks are just going to be the running backs, at least early on. We know what the Bears tried to do this past offseason, and I think it's pretty safe to say that they didn't accomplish what their goals were. And so, bringing back a guy like Swift and bringing back Johnson as your RB2, I don't think was planned. And so, having said that, can Ben Johnson make those guys fit whatever system they're trying to make happen? And so I agree. I think the wide receivers are the weapons that you have, as opposed to, I think this year it's going to be the running backs that supplement the wide receivers, at least in particularly early in the season, until we find out whether Swift, can all of a sudden adjust and fit Ben Johnson's scheme.
Yeah. Now let's take a look at how the Bears defense stacks up with the Vikings offense. And Jordan Addison, as we mentioned, he has a 3-game suspension for, I believe it was a drug violation. I'm not sure if that was PED or drugs, like drugs, but like it doesn't matter. It's 3 games. Right. And so they're going to have like Rondale Moore, and I forget who the other guy they have there is. I think it's a rookie. But either way, you're mostly talking the Justin Jefferson show. Justin Jefferson has not practiced much to this point in the year. So for week 1, that's probably a plus for the Bears, but because he's not getting that chemistry with JJ the same level. But at the same time, he's still Justin Jefferson. And on a similar note, Jalen Johnson hasn't practiced at all. We're hoping that he's ready for week 1. So like you need Jalen Johnson good for that matchup to be able to stop it. But on the overall aspect, I mean, this feels to me like the Vikings have the advantage. We're just looking at the colors and the numbers out here, where there's a lot more green on their side than the Bears side, in my opinion.
I agree, except the one yellow that's on the Minnesota side. And that's where, if JJ really isn't developing, and, it's going to be he did play 1 preseason game last year, right?
Yes. That's where he got hurt, I think.
It's going to be his first ever NFL game. And so if you can really confuse him, if he really does play like a true rookie, I think this is Dennis Allen's opportunity to make life hell for JJ. And if you make life hell for JJ, I think that gives you the best opportunity to, maybe get a pick or 2. All of a sudden, JJ in his first game, if he throws an interception, you're talking about, the whispers are out that we've addressed it already, that he's been struggling during these practice sessions. You get him in his own head against a very attacking defense like the Bears. And then you have an offense who hopefully on the other side, as we saw, we had more green on that side, right? So it's like the offense is clicking. And then if JJ makes a mistake or 2, that might be the recipe you need to try to upset the Vikings in week 1.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I'm looking at this, and I like the Vikings additions this offseason. I like the Ryan Kelly and the Will Freeze additions. I think those are solid moves. I like Donovan Jackson a lot in the draft. I think they really shored up the interior of that O-line. As long as Kelly and Freeze can stay healthy, which is a question, especially with Kelly being a little up there in age, but a veteran center to help JJ set the protections makes it all the sense in the world to me here. But the reason I'm talking about this, Sonny, you're a Big Ten guy. What did J.J. McCarthy do well at Michigan?
What, just like make plays? Like be like the game manager?
Be the game manager.
Yeah, game manager, yeah.
Because you run the football a lot and you get looks off play action for him to launch it up to Colston Loveland.
Yeah.
Rookie quarterbacks a lot of times, or second-year quarterbacks who never played, are getting asked to execute what they did well in college. What JJ did well in college was hand it off a lot and then get play action looks off of it. You need to stop this run defense without committing extra bodies to or run offense without committing extra bodies to the box. I think, like we said early in the show, there might be games where Andrew Billings is starting and getting a lot of snaps and games where he's getting none. This is one where Andrew Billings, I think, sees the field a lot in both matchups, because the way that you make JJ McCarthy uncomfortable, you put him in second long, you put him in third and long. That's a kind of a cheap shot. Like, that's the way you make any quarterback uncomfortable. But you force him into true drop back situations that he is not comfortable in. He's comfortable in play action looks and short distance stuff where the defense has to keep the rushing offense honest, not in stuff where everyone in the stadium knows you're passing. There's only one way to get there, and that's stopping the run on early downs.
So would you say, especially with Jordan Addison being out for this particular game, would you put extra emphasis on Jefferson or Hawkinson and really force JJ to find another guy? Because I don't know if the other guys are playmakers as opposed, like I actually like our cornerbacks and our defensive backs. Jefferson's on his own level, of course, that goes without saying. But if you make, as you mentioned, obviously at Michigan, he was very good at turning around and handing the ball off. Particularly, I remember against, I think it was a Penn State. I think they only passed the ball like under 10 times. But if you force JJ to make plays, and not just towards Jefferson can make plays by himself, but other guys, maybe that's the way you can kind of force JJ to make a mistake. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, so you don't play single coverage on Justin Jefferson, right? Yeah. Like every team in the NFL, you always have help over Justin Jefferson, which is so much what makes Minnesota's offense work, is the fact that they know Justin Jefferson's taking on two guys, so everyone else is playing 10 on 9. But with Hawkinson, like I do feel like you can lock up Hawkinson. If you can stop the run with your defensive line without committing an extra safety to the box, that means you have an extra safety to play off Jay Jetta. So you're not going to stop. Mm-hmm. You just hope to slow him down. You can hold him to 100 yards, you're happy. Just don't let him go off for like 150 or 200, like he does against some teams. Yeah. Like you keep him under 100, good day. But by not having to commit extra bodies to the run lanes, you allow an extra body to be able to man up Hawkinson, be able to pay a little extra attention to Hawkinson. And that's what, like, I don't think Hawkinson is a man beater. I think Hawkinson is his own merchant, which is like most tight ends are. Very few tight ends are man beaters. He's a zone merchant who's a good run blocker, which allows him space because he brings that threat of run blocking off play action. Like, so if you're stopping the run and you're not overly concerned with that threat, I'm not that worried about Hawkinson. And then I think your defense becomes a lot easier. Just we need to limit Jefferson, and we need to pay attention to Aaron Jones out of the backfield. But I do think the Bears have the linebackers to be able to manage that.
So game one, Dennis Allen, do you think you're going to pay more attention to taking away JJ McCarthy's weapons or make life hell attacking JJ?
I am taking away his weapons. Well, so that's ideal, right? Like, yeah. I'm taking away his weapons as long as my defensive line can shut down the run without those extra bodies, because it all comes back to that for me in this game. In a lot of NFL games, it all comes back to that. But like that's a whole nother point. But like, I know if I am dropping 7 guys consistently in coverage, I will be able to confuse JJ. Yeah. I'll have times where I'm dropping 8 if I'm Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen will drop 8. Sometimes he might even drop 9 on occasion. Like he gets weird with it, and he's going to be giving you all sorts of different pre-snap looks throughout it to make it tough. Like I think Dennis Allen's going to make life really hard on JJ in this first game, as long as the Bears can slow down that run game. If they can't, again, that's where you become more limited in the pre-snap looks you can give in the variety of what they go pre-snap to post-snap. And like, so to me, Andrew Billings and Dio Odeingbo are probably two of the biggest players in this game to me, because they're guys who can really hold the point against the run and make life difficult on their offensive line to move the football that way. But yeah, so to me, that's limiting weapons. I want to drop 7 guys as often as I can, because I think JJ is going to give me a gift as long as I'm making him read and wait.
I think you're right. It's having watched JJ, he went higher than any of us imagined he would go in that NFL draft, because Michigan didn't necessarily win games because of JJ. He was just very good at executing whatever game plan that was put forth, by Jim Harbaugh. And if I haven't seen him win any games at the college level, then I absolutely want to see if he can prove it, that he can win a game with his arm at the NFL level. We're 1 month away, essentially, from the first game. How confident are you feeling in this matchup?
Probably more confident than I should be.
Yeah.
I'll say that much. I mean, a lot of my confidence roots from the Caleb Williams actually looked pretty solid against Brian Flores in his first 2 games against him for a rookie. And Ben Johnson is a guy who has a good track record against Brian Flores. But like, I do feel pretty confident here. And a lot of that also roots from JJ. If JJ comes out and all the reports are wrong, then I start to look real silly really fast,
But it wouldn't be just us, right? It's literally
right.
All the reports, all the experts are saying the same thing. And it's funny I asked that question because I'm right with you. Before we started this episode, I was thinking, okay, it's going to be a tough task. I even said, let's just keep it close. But then as soon as the idea popped in my head, I was like, wait, how has Ben Johnson done against Minnesota? Obviously he's very familiar with their defense. And you just told me that they're 4-0 and they've scored 30 plus points each game. Caleb himself, who, is an X factor, he's performed pretty well against a team that won the division last year. So it's not like, Minnesota was a bad football team. And we have the weapons that I don't think Minnesota can match up with on the defensive side. Now, all of a sudden, yeah, I'm a lot more optimistic than I was, 50 minutes ago before we started recording.
An underrated factor here too. I mean, JJ McCarthy is going to be making his first NFL start at home with all his family in tow. We're talking about a Nazareth alumnus here, kid from LaGrange Park.
That's true.
Like, all of his family is going to be there. All his friends are going to be there. And a lot of them are probably going to be rooting for the Bears, or a lot of his friends, at least. Family's probably always rooting for him, but some of his friends are probably going to be rooting for the Bears and giving him a little shit. But that's what friends are for.
And Caleb's the opposite in the sense where he hears all this drama, made up drama, I'm going to call it, over this past off season. And all the love going towards Jaden Daniels and not towards Caleb. I think he's itching for the chance to really show these naysayers out there that, hey, just quiet. Look, make fun of this.
Yeah. And let's see. It being in Chicago is a big difference to me too. I mean, the Bears historically play the Vikings very difficultly in Chicago. The last 5 years have been tougher, but they lost by 3, lost by 6, lost by 16. That one's a little further. Lost by 8, lost by 6. And then before that, they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of 13, even more, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 of 21. The Bears won before that stretch at Soldier Field. There is something about the Vikings at Soldier Field that they have always struggled with. It's been a tough place for them to play. And it's going to be a rabid environment.
Oh, for sure. I mean, how excited is this fan base, right? We've been itching to get this season started, not just Caleb year 2, but to see what Ben Johnson is going to, open up this little toy box and see what he can execute with this offense, Dennis Allen and his defense. And we talked about it earlier, this team is so ready to hit somebody. They're already smashing, amongst themselves. And so I think there's energy, not just with the fan base, but the players themselves. Eberflus, for all his for his strengths, I guess you can say. A clear weakness was the fact that like he wasn't really a guy that seemed to get you energized. And I feel like, in particular, by the end of the season, we won't name names, but like the energy in the locker room, just there was zero confidence in him. And I think we've got the complete 180 of that right now. There's a lot of people who are in a Chicago Bears uniform who want to prove that they can play in a Ben Johnson on a Ben Johnson football team, and with Dennis Allen, and I just think there's going to be a lot of energy, and I think they're having the team that won the division last year at your home, a lot of people are going to want to make a statement week one.
Yeah, I don't know how many players in the history of the NFL have been excited to play for Shane Waldron or Luke Getsy or Matt Eberflus. I can imagine a lot of players being excited to play, and I was a supporter of the Eberflus hire when it happened, but it wasn't because I felt like he was an exciting guy that players would want to play for. It was, I thought there were enough connections there and experience for him to be able to bring you along to the next level, but that was wrong. Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen are two guys who I have a very easy time imagining players being excited to play in that offense and having a lot of faith, offense and defense, and having a lot of faith in the positions their coaches are putting them in.
One more month, Q. We can do this.
1 month. All right, Sonny, any final thoughts before we close this thing out?
No, I mean, it'll be nice to see the Bears square up against players in a different uniform over the next couple days. I don't know what we're going to hear out of Hallis Hall and what the reports are going to be, but just keep the same energy, but more importantly, just stay healthy.
Just stay healthy. That's what we're hoping for after seeing Darnell Wright and Kyler Gordon go down from the practice field today. Hopefully all minor stuff. I haven't seen anything saying otherwise, but Sonny, why don't we just get out of here the only way we know how?
Bear down, Q.
Bear down.